Welcome back to another episode of Beverly Arts Talk, brought to you by the Beverly Arts Center. This is your host, Matt McKinney. Our topic today, saving the arts in the time of COVID-19. Beverly Arts Center, located on Chicago's South Side, is a multifaceted organization building community through diverse, quality arts programming, education, and entertainment for all ages and levels. Today, we'll hear an interview with former Beverly Arts Center outreach assistant Kevin Brown as he talks to us about the importance of and history of social work, a field that he is currently studying, as well as the importance of finding equity in these trying times, and what the role of and importance of arts organizations like the Beverly Arts Center are to the communities that rely on them. We'll then hear a conversation with Chicago Repertory Ballet dancer and violinist Miriam-Rose LeDuc, as she talks to us about how COVID-19 is affecting the dance community and what it could mean for the dance world going forward. Both of these interviews were conducted earlier in the year on May 5th, 2020. Please join us for those conversations. I have with me today a former musical teaching artist and outreach assistant here at the Beverly Arts Center who is here to talk about his experiences and observations in the arts and his studies in social work. Kevin is currently studying at Washington University in St. Louis. Kevin, welcome. We're in some strange times.
Thank you, Matt. Good to see you. Good to hear your voice. And yes, these are very strange and uncertain times. The two words I've been hearing a lot the last couple months.
Yes, absolutely. So before all this, what was it that led you to want to go back to school and study social work? You were teaching percussion and music before you decided to do that in our outreach program. And as I recall, you were in between classes at Carver Elementary and the Elk Gardens Public Library when you decided to apply. Tell me about that decision and what it's been like going back to school.
Sure. Yeah. So, I had spent the last 12 years or so working as a teaching artist for a few different organizations, including Beverly Arts Center, of course, in and out of a lot of public schools, including, of course, Carver Elementary, one of Beverly Arts' recent school partners. I did work on a lot of my application in that library between classes. I'm not sure if that environment single-handedly inspired me to apply, but just having been exposed to a lot of public school environments, it felt like there was perhaps more that I could be doing to sort of help empower some of the students in our public schools to be equipped to learn not just arts, but like a lot of the, content being presented in our schools. There's a lot of sort of systematic problems with the way our public schools are funded and the way that they are operated. And after I think 10 or more years of being exposed to that, it felt like time to pivot, not entirely away from public education, but kind of redirect my approach, as fun as it has been to teach music and a little bit of chess in those environments. So yeah, I still have one foot in the arts world. My undergraduate studies were also in the arts, and I still consider myself a musician, but sort of reconfiguring how I can make a difference in the public schools.
And you're going to come back to Chicago, do you think, when you're done with your master's? And would you want to do your social work here in Chicago?
Yeah, that's the plan. I deliberately looked for programs outside of Chicago because I'm sort of an explorer by nature. I'm actually originally from San Diego area. So I came out to the Chicago area for undergraduate degree, I guess like 16 or more years now ago. So, but yeah, I had not had much experience in St. Louis. I had heard a lot of things about it. There, a lot of sort of anecdotal things about the parallels between these two cities, and felt like it was time to sort of see for myself. And, having been there for just about a year now, I would say it's largely true that there are a lot of interesting comparisons to be made. Certainly the public education systems face similar challenges. I think the cities have a lot they can learn from each other. So, and they're close enough that it's been fun to be lucky enough to be able to kind of bounce between the two.
what's the art venting programming like out there in the public schools in St. Louis? Is it similar to Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I honestly don't, I'm probably not the best authority to speak to that. I've done some of my practicum work this year with the Boys and Girls Club of Greater St. Louis, which is a local division of the national organization, Boys and Girls Club of America. And they have a number of sites that are based in schools. So they are offering a lot of kind of after school programs, and some of that programming is artistic. There is one other organization that I know of called St. Louis Artworks that does a lot of arts programs that I think are directed mostly to high school age students, and it's site specific in that students come to their location rather than them facilitating the arts programs in the schools. To be honest, I haven't encountered a ton of organizations like Beverly Arts that are specifically dedicated to bringing arts to the schools, but that's not to say that they don't exist. I have a feeling that they probably do exist. But in this new field that I'm a part of, being social work, I'm not necessarily privy to those.
You said before the interview that one of your favorite subjects in social work has been this almost type of revolutionary thinking in the field where there is a lot of questioning about the social work field itself. Can you tell me what some of those questions are and what the reasons are for that?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even know if it's necessarily revolutionary. I've been exposed to a lot of courses and professors that are, I think, rightly questioning a lot of the kind of like origins of social work as a profession. There's some text actually just from like the mid 1980s that really kind of shines a light on the extent to which, you know, the social work field didn't really emerge until comfortable middle class ways of life were being threatened by increasingly marginalized working populations. As you may know, a lot of the origins of social work are traceable to Chicago in like the sort of progressive era, early 1900s, with Jane Addams and the Hull House movement. And one of the criticisms of that movement is that it was sort of a middle class effort to keep their own lives comfortable. Successful or not, that could be debated. But the other sort of criticism of the field is its sort of attempts to legitimize itself through quote unquote professionalism. So, I mean, there's sort of a trend in social work that we're questioning the social sciences in many ways and questioning the data that's used, to form theories around social behaviors. Fields like sociology and psychology use a lot of theorizing around data that is largely created by and for dominant groups and kind of perpetuates, oppressive behaviors and sort of different class standings. And so in that sense, it's kind of like a little bit of a paradox. The social work wants itself taken seriously in professional realms and certainly in academia, but there's almost an inherent inability for the field to capture real sort of in long-term data. In other words, like the premise of social work is that the environment is always changing, that people should be kind of considered in the context of their environment. And when the social environment is constantly changing, it's very hard to really study. I mean, you can study trends, but it's up for debate how easily those trends and conclusions can be mapped onto any given population. So I would say that, yeah, a lot of the first year of coursework has been, some of the most memorable parts of it have been really kind of questioning the field itself and raising questions about, what you think you're doing there as a student. Because meanwhile, you're at like an institution of higher learning, which also is contributing in many ways to, the class divide and a lot of the other issues perpetuating marginalization.
So, Kevin, what did you learn in the arts that has helped you understand or relate to your experiences in the social work field? Or vice versa? Is there something in your studies that has helped you understand the arts a bit more?
Sure. I mean, artistic expression has always been sort of a non-verbal form of communication. And I've been thinking about that recently. I did a little project about art therapy, which is a term that is sometimes misused because it is a developing professional practice that has its own sort of oversight board and licensure process. So it does require sort of a specific degree, but the focus of art therapy is to really extract meaning and sort of communicative expression from art, using art as sort of a replacement for verbal language. I think that's a useful framework for like approaching any given interaction. I mean, particularly with people who might have different identities from your own. Art, I guess, for lack of a better pun, is sort of a blank canvas, right? You have sort of this blank slate to creatively articulate experiences. And from there, you have an audience that's sort of asked to listen, right, or just absorb any given message being relayed through the artwork. So in both cases, there's an exchange of ideas that may involve sort of this filter. In the case of art, there's sort of an understanding that one party is the maker and the other party is the audience. But at the center of that exchange is something very true and meaningful, right? And it's similar with social work. I think the biggest takeaway from like kind of clinical practice elements of social work is that the one of the most useful things you can do is listen and just try to facilitate the expression of something true to a person's experience. So I think there's a lot of overlap there with the arts.
So recently, we've all had to become very familiar with online learning and online performances from artists. Do you think this is the future of the arts and education, and how can artists make the most out of this moment right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess I'll tackle the arts rather than the education piece first, because to be honest, I don't have a lot of thoughts or insight on the educational aspect of this. But I do think artists, are being forced to think creatively about how to get their work out there, and maybe more urgently, how to be compensated for that work. That's always been a challenge among artists, and that we're seeing. I guess for my part, I'm seeing more than ever a lot of people putting their work out for free. And that's always been somewhat true in the arts, but more than ever, you're getting artwork, especially a lot of music and performing arts, piped directly to your screen with these live streams. And it's almost unfortunate to me that more of them are not actively collecting money for that. I think that, again, as audience members, we have some responsibility to give patronage to the art that we care about. And, I saw the musician Erykah Badu has done a small series of live streams in her house or some building where they move from room to room, and it's vaguely interactive, and there's a bunch of musicians in each room. And I think this was maybe more possible before the real quarantine took effect, and there's maybe more stigma around having anybody in her home now. But at the time, she was charging $1 for the stream. She's obviously very popular and can rake in a few $1,000s from the many people who will pay $1 to see her. But there were others who were very upset that she was collecting any money for anything other than a charity. For me personally, I was happy to pay her and her huge team of collaborators $1, just to keep the art alive. It was like very worth my money. And I didn't feel the need. I mean, I am also trying to give charitably where I can. There's a lot of organizations asking for your donations. I'm at the point where, it's like helpful to maybe start a small spreadsheet to track like who you're giving to and how much, because you only have so much. But, I think before all this, we were all budgeting some money for the arts. Like we go out to concerts, we buy music or what have you. And I see no reason why that needs to stop. I think it sort of falls to artists to have that confidence and the kind of creativity to deliver something that people are willing to pay for, and acknowledge and sort of accept or acknowledge that people do still want art and it's still worth something. So I think that's one of the bigger challenges facing artists right now.
Yeah, I wonder right now if I mean I going back to Erica Badu, I find it interesting that people got mad that she was trying to make a living still being an artist. Um, but I wonder if maybe like a donation jar or a a pay what you want type of platform might be the better way to go right now as an
Yeah,
artist.
I think she has since actually basically gone that route and made some of those things more donation based. And that again, that's great. She has a lot of privileges as an established artist, obviously, and frankly, more sort of high profile established artists probably should be taking advantage of this opportunity for perhaps more charitable means, maybe trickling down to other artists. I know a lot of that is happening. There's a lot of kind of artist coalitions and things that we can be donating to. So, yeah, I just think that I've always been a little bit fascinated, by this relationship between art and commerce. And I think for those of us in the field, it's worth considering the implications of this moment for artists, like for the viability of art as a profession going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the unemployment numbers going up daily, um, you know, I think back to history a little bit. I think back to how the arts were somewhat saved during moments like in the Great Depression, when FDR implemented the Works Progress Administration and had the federal Project Number One that employed visual artists, musicians, actors, writers, built community centers around the country, employed artists like Jackson Pollock, built the Hoover Dam, the John Adams Building at the Library of Congress, the San Francisco Mint. Anyway, did a it was this was an organization that ended up forming later the National Foundation of the Arts.
Sure.
Maybe we need something like that right now.
Yeah.
Maybe we need a government program that's going to preserve the art centers and the theaters and concert halls around the country.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, meanwhile, like at a sort of hobbyist level, I feel like the arts are probably thriving because in any given home, there's maybe more time for sort of creative endeavors that people previously just didn't have the time for, considered superfluous or unnecessary. I think we've always, we at the Beverly Arts Center, or as teaching artists, have always kind of understood the importance of keeping creativity as part of our lives. But I'm hopeful that with like this newfound time that people have on their hands, that they might be sort of exploring new creative outlets in their own lives and finding maybe more time for things that they previously found to be unnecessary, or just being incapable of finding time for it.
Right. I hope that continues. I know that during the Great Depression, the the Works Progress Administration, it was critiqued at times for being what a lot of people thought was wasteful spending. Some people thought that the arts were not necessary for that level of unemployment and people without work, which obviously is very discouraging. And none of us believe that here, but I saw some of that when during the last stimulus, they put into the bill about the Kennedy Center being, essentially given funds. And as I looked on social media, especially social media from maybe places that aren't around DC, friends that I have in more rural conservative areas, they were like, why is this place getting funded, and not taking into account the cultural importance of keeping a place like the Kennedy Center around. What is the Beverly Arts Center role in all of this, and do you think we are essential to this mission right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, it's extremely valuable as a community center. There between the sort of location and the facility itself, I think that the Beverly Arts Center represents more than just the art within the building. I think that it's sort of a centerpiece for the community, and so that that represents a gathering space and sort of just a hub for the exchange of ideas, for personal interactions that are obviously being missed right now. So there's something to be said for the institution just by virtue of its location and existence, completely separate from what it's doing. But it's also obviously making art very accessible to the community. So I think it's important to have approachable, affordable programs that people can access easily, in any given neighborhood or city. And Chicago is obviously a huge city, so in the case of Beverly, it's serving sort of a section of the South Side. But I think that those types of organizations are crucial. And then, I mean, to extend the artistic mission further, Beverly Arts has the outreach programs, and that department is really committed to bringing art to schools, and that is further critical, especially in a lot of the schools that Beverly partners with. There's no other arts programs. There's very few resources provided to them, very few artistic materials, certainly no art teachers. So there's very little integration of the arts into the regular curriculum. And that's why the Beverly Arts Center's presence there, I think, is very important, giving students an outlet to be creative and express themselves creatively, has always been important, but I think will be perhaps more crucial than ever kind of coming out of this. And that's why, teaching artists play an important role in the lives of these young people. I mean, I remember from first grade having like illustrators visit my class to teach us how to draw like a caterpillar. It's like bizarre how clearly that experience like has stuck with me, right up through like, fourth grade, picking up a drum for the first time with some guy who came in to teach band. They weren't, masterpieces, but they were sort of formative in terms of like directing a learning style that was sort of open-minded and open to abstract thinking. And, there's plenty of research to support the importance of art in schools. So if, there's a school down the road from a place like the Beverly Arts Center that just has no artistic programming, I see it as a critical service that the Beverly Arts Center is providing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in times of a national or global crisis like we're in right now, even more important, right? I mean, you have we're gonna be seeing much more inequality across the board, I think, because of this after the economic downturn really takes off. What can arts organizations do about that right now, especially knowing how dire straits that they are currently in?
I mean, I think it's magnifying sort of disparities that have always been there, and really exposing them. And I think we need to respond, perhaps more dramatically than we have in the past, because we're recognizing it. It's kind of right in front of our face now. You can't really look away in this moment when we see the disparities being reported between certain communities and how they're being impacted by this. An organization like the Arts Center should continue to, approach their service from an equity lens and really try to provide these services for communities that would benefit from them the most, making them accessible to communities that might not otherwise be able to afford them. I think that the Arts Center has always, for as long as I've been there, just in the last, I guess, like 5 to 6 years, have taken that approach. That's one thing that drew me to the organization in the first place. But in terms of reaching out to your neighbor, or if your aunt or uncle isn't convinced, it's a good opportunity to shine a light on it and to really call attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, it was great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on. We hope to have you back at some point. Maybe you can give us some drum lessons or
I appreciate you having me on today, and wish you and the Beverly Arts Center all the best.
Thank you, and we'll be right back. My next guest is Miriam-Rose LeDuc. She is a ballet dancer with Chicago Repertory Ballet, as well as a teaching artist and violinist who plays Scottish fiddle. You might find her playing at the Farmers Market on 95th and Longwood from time to time. She has worked within our outreach program, teaching dance at McClellan Elementary School on the South Side. Miriam-Rose is also currently advising on a possible nutcracker at the Beverly Arts Center, which would have been the first of its kind, but I understand that was before the pandemic, making that production uncertain right now. Her latest production with Chicago Repertory Ballet was Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, as well as an untitled ballet piece of my own that was also postponed until the fall. I must also put a disclaimer out there. She is my wife. Miriam-Rose, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me on your show.
It's great to have you. With all of these cancellations and postponements around the city, what does the future of ballet look like right now?
That's a pretty loaded question. I would have to say it's uncertain. A lot of it depends on funding, quite frankly. Right now, dancers across the city are taking class in their living rooms or offering class on Instagram Live or Facebook Live. Many of those classes are being offered for free. So there's quite a lack of cash flow happening right now, and there certainly isn't anything coming in from the live theater productions that had to be canceled or postponed. So a lot of live performance companies in particular are really hurting right now. A lot of the dancers are inside coping by trying to create music video style pieces that sort of simulate the work that they were trying to create in the studio. But of course, there are limits to what can be done with that. As far as the future of concert dance, I think, you know, a lot of it really depends on what kind of restrictions are put in place going forward. Are we going to have to limit the audience size and have people spread out in the auditorium? And if so, is that going to be lucrative for performing companies to even hold those performances? The other question to ask is, you know, are people going to feel comfortable going to the theater? There might be a fear of being in public spaces or going to crowded events. Even if the circumstances are such that we don't have to worry about being in a performance space with many other people or being in close contact with others, there's a very real possibility that the financial impact of COVID-19 will deter people from paying for tickets and attending theater events.
Yeah, so you talked about how right now you guys are doing a lot of e-learning type of classes, right? Well, I guess not really. They're like just classes, right? They'd be like a normal ballet class, right, that you would go to, but they're doing it over what, Zoom?
There are a couple different platforms being used. Many of my peers and teachers started out using Instagram Live and Facebook Live and just streaming those for free. And there are even some celebrity dancers like Tyler Peck of New York City Ballet who are doing the same and just giving back to the community with free classes. But some of the studios, Visceral Dance Studio is a great example of this. They're now offering Zoom classes, which you can pay for if you have virtual Visceral. And there are some payment options. I think the lowest payment option is $5 a class. So they are offering paid classes, but given the circumstances and given the restricted budgets of artists to begin with, they were sensitive to that and cut down on the price.
Are they like dance studios that are offering these and then they're paying their teachers, or is it just like a dance teacher that out of the kindness of their heart decides they want to start giving free classes because they believe in it?
It's really all of the above. Yeah, I mean, I've seen all of it. I've seen individuals going out on their own offering classes for free. I've seen individual teachers scheduling Zoom classes and recommending or requesting donations if possible. and I've seen platforms like Visceral Dance running official classes through Zoom through their own mind body platform on their website.
Ballet is a very physical art form, very physically demanding. Is giving yourself class in your living rooms or bedrooms, is it enough right now to stay in shape?
No, is the short answer. There is just a limit to what you can do. You might be able to jump a little bit depending on what kind of floor you have. We're lucky to have hardwood floors that have a little bit of spring, but if you live in a building with a hard floor, like anything with cement, you might really feel more of the impact and could hurt yourself by jumping too much. So that's a sincere limitation. The restricted space in and of itself is extremely limiting, of course. The last exercise of class we refer to as Grand Allegro, and it consists of huge leaps and big steps that really fly across the floor, and that's simply not possible to do right now. And there's quite a lot of stamina and strength involved in that sort of exercise. So while we can keep up with certain things like a basic bar exercises, basic weight-bearing exercises that mostly stay in place, there is quite a lot that we're not able to do right now.
So those limitations are also going to apply for children, right? And when young children are trying to take those classes, the e-learning classes in their living room, and I assume maybe their parents are there, but they've got to make sure that the rooms are safe to dance in, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you ensuring that type of a safe place, to dance for children?
Well, I personally am not teaching any online classes for young students right now, but I never did it over Zoom where the kids were in their living room. But in my experience, there are a couple different factors. Of course, you want to make sure that, they're not going to stub their toe on the coffee table or trip over the end of a rug or something like that. But an important thing to keep in mind for a lot of really young dancers is the fundamentals of the training really start at the bar, and there isn't as much required in terms of the use of the space. A lot of it is just learning, how to stand correctly, how to move in such a way so that your hip bones stay on the same level. There's a lot of really slow fundamental work that happens more or less in place at a certain stage in your training. So that's the good news for a lot of kids.
With up and coming dancers that are looking for a career in it, what is this going to do to them? What is the pandemic and the stay-at-home order going to do to dancers that might be coming out of college or were trying to audition for companies right now? Does this really hurt them?
I think in some ways, yes. Audition season is hard to begin with. It's extremely grueling and very competitive. But the silver lining to having an audition season during a pandemic, I believe I'm saying that, the silver lining really is that, first of all, a lot of companies are actually allowing dancers to audition via video, which is pretty novel. Usually you're invited to take a company class or to progress in the audition process by sending a video, but it's not ever your final step in the interview process, so to speak. And now a lot of companies are trying to pivot and offer video auditions as an option for dancers, which really cuts down on travel costs, because traveling to different cities and taking auditions with numerous companies every season is really expensive.
So let's talk about some of the closures in the city. Recently, Lou Conte, a dance studio staple here in Chicago that was the home for Hubbard Street, was shut down. Well, I should say they went out of business. Is that correct?
They closed their doors permanently.
And that was right after the stay-at-home order. So that was a huge blow to the community, right? To the dance community.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the dance community? Will we be seeing more of these?
More of these shutdowns? I certainly hope not. I think a lot of studios right now, while they're temporarily closed, are doing everything they can to engage their students and to stay active in their dance community. So I don't anticipate, at least as long as they can receive the funding and the cash flow that they need to stay open, I don't anticipate any other closures, at least not in the immediate future, I hope. Lucanti was truly devastating news for the dance community because of the incredible home that it provided for so many young aspiring professionals and freelance professionals here in the city. However, they were having some trouble leading up to the COVID-19 crisis. They had already sold their building and they didn't have a landing place yet. So there was a lot of uncertainty there. And I think this was probably something that their board was anticipating even before the crisis happened. So as sad as it is, I do think that there is hope for the rest of the dance community, given that there were some other issues involved with their show. And the Hubbard Street company is still in full force. They're dancing at home and they plan to return.
Well, that's good news.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right now, with the economic downturn leading to all these closures, we're going to see a larger equity problem too, with so many people out of work. Do you think that there will be more scholarships offered? Is that possible to do that? What are organizations going to have to start doing to keep dancers dancing right now, especially those who can't afford it right now?
Yeah, well, I do think that in a lot of ways this circumstance has allowed the dance community to really see how much opportunity there is for giving back. Funding in the arts is always a tricky thing, but assuming that dancers and dance studios and dance companies are provided with the funding and resources and cash flow that they need to stay afloat, I do think that this has been sort of an awareness raising process of realizing, we can give away some of our resources to the community. We can give back for free. We've been doing it now for months, weeks. And I think that this will hopefully inspire more resources for underserved communities in terms of providing them with opportunities to dance that we didn't see before. So assuming that the funding exists to keep those organizations alive, I do think that a lot of companies should be thinking about how they can continue to give back after this crisis ends.
Thank you, Miriam-Rose. I hope to have you on again to discuss some of those very exciting projects you were working on. And before we go, would you mind soothing our souls a little bit with some violin, since I know you play?
Sure. Yes, you do. Well, I can lighten the mood a little bit with a Scottish reel.
Brava. All right. Thank you, Miriam-Rose LeDuc. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
And please, listeners and dear patrons of the arts, feel free to donate to the Beverly Arts Center on our website, beverlyartscenter.org. We will survive through this time with the generosity of listeners and patrons like you. This has been Matt McKinney with the Beverly Arts Center. Thank you for listening. Please be well and be safe.